Good morning and welcome to Christ Church as we gather to give thanks to God for Brian and for his life well lived, to get alongside his wife and children and grandchildren and family, to express to them our sympathy and our condolences, but more importantly to celebrate a remarkable life. We've been joined by about 20 people on the live feed of the streaming of the service, and I'm sure that more will join us. The program has been set out for us, so I'm not going to jump up every time and say who will be next to speak. I take it we can follow the order and sequence as set out in the program. In the book Deuteronomy, there is this beautiful image of God cradling us as a mother does a child. The eternal God is our refuge, and underneath are God's everlasting arms. And in the book Lamentation, which is a funeral dirge, are these words of confidence and reassurance. May you as a family know both today. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. God's mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. We stand to sing the first of our hymns, All Things Bright and Beautiful.
God that made them all, each little flower that opens, each little bird that sings. God made their glowing colors, God made their tiny wings, all things bright and beautiful, great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. The purple-headed mountains, the river running by, the sunset and the morning that brightens up the sky, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. The cold wind in the winter, the pleasant summer sun, the ripe fruits in the garden, God made them every one. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. God gave us eyes to see them, and lips that we might tell how great is God Almighty, who has made all things well. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all.
So I invite you to be seated now as we hear tributes from various people.
Right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a celebration of Father Brian Allanson's life, the son of the late Arthur and Edith Allanson, the twin of the late Brenda, and brother to Audrey. I have the honor of doing this tribute on behalf of the children today on the basis that I should be able to keep it together and emulate Dad's incredible ability as an orator. So I shall take the most meaningful words that he ever uttered to me as strength to pay this tribute, and they come from the handwritten note that he had pre-printed postcards with his name and address, style that he had, and he handed me that note as I boarded the train in January 1985 on my way to do military service, with a whole lot of salivating corporals waiting me in the passages of the train. And the note said simply, "Be strong and of good courage, Dad." And I still have that note. And these words, they come from Bible, Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, which says, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." How appropriate in my circumstances at that time. And that these words were the words that I typed to him on my phone, because his hearing at his, when he passed away, basically non-existent. On the Friday when I left, before he passed away on the Sunday, and I showed him these words, and he just squeezed my hand and smiled. So I'm going to take strength from these words while I stand here today, and you will notice them on the pamphlet below the great picture of my dad on the back. And I want to dwell on that picture on the back of the pamphlet for a moment, because it's taken on the sandbanks of his beloved Knysna estuary at low tide, with their heads in the background and looking out caringly over the water. The authoritative walking stick with Rex, one of his favorite hounds, the tartan tie bringing a sense of class and tradition, his worn corduroys, and the wind in his shock of white hair for which he was so well known. Dad had an incredible life and a career as a scientist, researcher, teacher, and mentor, which Professor Mike Bruton, one of Dad's longtime colleagues and friends, will touch on later for us. And the tributes that have been so many from so wide and far on Dad's life. What Dad did in his life can be akin to weaving a tapestry of amazingly different colors and bold weaves, forming something so inspirational and strong. At the center of Dad's tapestry was his beautiful wife of 67 years, Sue, who he met while at UCT and who used to help him push his motorbike up the hill on occasion. She is a dedicated and committed wife who has been by his side and constant support for Dad throughout Dad's life, for better, for worse, but much loved by Brian to his last day. I will never forget the recent picture of Dad visiting Sue when she had been in the step-down facility, having had a hip-hop in COVID, and he was handing her a bouquet of flowers, mask and all, and both of them in a wheelchair. It was a great image. Sue has been the calmness and steadiness needed by Dad as he charged ahead on his scientific endeavors. By Dad's own admission, he would agree that Sue sometimes deserved a medal for managing Dad's ambition, his passion, concern for his students, and his children's antics. What Sue was and will remain for Dad is a much-loved mother of 5 beautiful children, including myself, their spouses and partners, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. Dad's interest and attention to what all family members in the A-team, thank goodness for WhatsApp, we could stay in contact, what they were doing, whether it be at school, traveling, or university, or working, was constant and caring. He loved us all and was very proud of his family. He was often overheard talking to people about various members, both young and old, with such pride. His most common terms of endearment when keeping up with the times and sending WhatsApp messages to the A-team always ended with the words such as great affection and fond love, GP. Dad's love for his family sometimes stretched into the serious interest of their station in life. Studies and careers, and me and my siblings, grandchildren, and even the odd spouse would have the most daunting moment of being summoned to his study. As he did with his students whom he thought required a private talking to, and having one's conduct and mindset refocused on what was really required if you had strayed from what Dad considered to be the required focus. Many of us and his students could tell you tales of these study moments, fearsome at the time, but on reflection, always wise counsel. As children, he so often explained the world to us in scientific terms when he asked questions, and he exposed us to so many fascinating things. Robin remembers being taken to the tiny aquarium that he and his students had from the Rhodes Zoo Department set up in a little boathouse down on the Kawi River in Port Alfred. And there were tanks of all sorts of creatures found in the river that were being studied. We always had to finish our homework on Saturdays so that Sundays were free, and then we would drive to Port Alfred in the station wagon or sedan after breakfast with a picnic lunch, which always included hard-boiled eggs. We'd spend the day on the beach and the Port Alfred Lagoon. Liz recalls a trip back from Port Alfred to Grahamstown when Dad had secured an octopus in a plastic packet in the boot of the car. The octopus disappeared en route, never to be seen again, bag remaining in the boot. I recall the lab in Neisner when he had so keen to show us all the small tanks in which he and his students, now in the Neisner estuary, were studying, which included the famed Neisner seahorse, a creature that would become synonymous with his time in Neisner and has too snuck onto the back of your pamphlet. Beyond the family and sciences, Dad found great joy in so many of the ordinary things. He loved literature and was well read. And he was a brilliant orator of the Winnie the Pooh tales. His voice was soothing and bold. He used to tell us to go and find the fairies that lived at the bottom of the garden, and some of us absolutely believed they were real. Such was his tone of convincing that Liz believed, and to this day still does, and she had built her own fairy garden in the bottom of her garden at home. And Sal used to even post letters to the fairies at the post office, so convincing was Dad about the fairies. Dad loved music, a passion he shared with Liz, and we grew up on a wide range of classical sounds through the house, especially on Sundays. While living in Pretoria, Dad acquired a grand piano. Robin and Liz remember the day it arrived and how excited he was. The piano became a very big part of our lives, some even learning to play on it. While in Pretoria, he and a friend, Henry Welsh, on the clarinet, played after supper on a regular occasion. Once in Grahamstown, the musical evenings continued with Bob van Hiller on the cello and Robin Bolt playing the clarinet. Picture the scene. It was a wonderful falling asleep to Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven. The piano, however, was also a good mood indicator. Had he had a good day, the chords of Bach would waft through the passages of the Hermitage in Grahamstown as he caressed the keys upon his returning home, opposed to a bad day when Beethoven got a working over and he knew it had not been the greatest day in the Department of Zoology and Entomology at Rhodes. And one might ask the question, well, what was it at Rhodes that influenced his mood? Well, Dad was fully invested in his students and their success. He wanted them to do well and be the best scientists they could be. He formed close professional relationships with many senior students over the years, and even the students who did undergrad geology courses, etc., will record Dad's impact that it had on their lives. Dad wanted his students to do well, and exam time at home was always known as he gave that piano a good working over, releasing the day's tensions awaiting for his students' results. His love for music stretched into his years in Neisner, where he played the organ in the Anglican church on Sundays until his hearing deteriorated to the extent that he was no longer comfortable doing so. Sailing was another of Dad's great passions. He built 2 sailing dinghies, as I recall, an Enterprise, which he would sail when Robin was the only one big enough to do so with him on Settlers Dam outside Grahamstown, and a mirror that he built with Nick, which Nick went on to sail competitively. We used to trek to these regattas in the good old Chev 4100 sedan, the mirror upside down on the roof racks, and the blue caravan in tow. What an adventure it was. He loved sailing yachts too, and he did so on Lake Windermere in the Lake District, on the Broads in Norfolk, on his sabbaticals in the UK, and in later years on his beloved Knysna estuary, where he owned a small yacht that he moored in Leisure Isle Harbour, a place he helped create himself. Nick recalls in Knysna a time sailing on the estuary when Dad threw caution to the wind and with full sail and skipper and spinnaker up, navigated his way through all the anchored yachts and boats, past a packed Knysna Yacht Club on a Sunday, dodging the hazards, which Nick recalls as a hair-raising experience, while he, Nick, in the front was quietly trying to spill wind from the spinnaker to slow the progress down, much to the scorn of the captain who was enjoying the thrill, and he was not allowed to do so. It was incredible. Dad was a member of the Knysna Yacht Club for years, where he loved the Sunday lunches, and it also resulted in him attempting to sail a yacht back from Rio at the age of 70-odd, only to be the one who inquired of the amount of water and supplies on board after a delayed start and many days in the doldrum in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and thus resulting in a turnaround of the boat, about turn, back to Rio, and him catching a flight back to South Africa and throwing and giving kudos to the saying, discretion is the better part of valor. And valor and discretion are something needed when you fly small aeroplanes, and that is another thing that dear Dad loved. He learned to fly and bought a small Piper Cherokee 180 plane with a call sign never to be forgotten of Echo Oscar Delta. He would insist on trips to collect those arriving at the PE airport who would then place their trust in him and his little plane as he flew them back to Grahamstown. Picture the scene. He also flew to his research stations, including the Pique-Larue Dam, as opposed to the long drive, and even Sally to Bloemfontein to visit a friend, and me to a girlfriend's farm strip near Bedford, dodging the springboks in the camp as we landed. And he was a good and thorough pilot, and something that Nick inherited with his love for flying. When Nick was flying, I recall Nick telling me how Dad had taken Dad for a flight up from the Plet airport, and they had to survey the Knysna estuary from the air, low and slow, as Nick flew this plane, and what a thrill that brought to Dad. Dad loved animals, and not at least dogs. His first dog was a male fellow in Port Elizabeth, a Doberman by the name of Toby. Soon after Mom and Dad were married, they bought a Ridgeback called Tessa as their first child. She lived to 17, and the day she died, Dad shut himself in his office for hours. We always had dogs, and even after we'd all left home, the love for the dogs continued. I think I counted 9, actually, since Tessa. And this love, Dad loved walking the dogs, and that walking was a key element of Dad and his health through the years. Animals in the outdoors featured in what can only then be described as a midlife crisis, when he decided to go farming for a few years while still full-time at Rhodes University. He acquired Robin Hill and Olive Park Farm, both on the Salem Road near Grahamstown. But being a zoologist and pharmacist, however, something somewhat different, and it always struck me how Dad, an intelligent and knowledgeable man, was so willing to listen and learn from the local farmers, such as the farming Salem legend Frank Nelson and the like. And many Sunday lunch and tea was spent with Frank discussing what was required to be a farmer in the lower Albany district. Mom ended up doing a lot of the farming, though. And in reality, it didn't last long. And soon we were back in Grahamstown, and we had swapped out the farm for the stables in Kenton-on-Sea, where we spent many wonderful beach and river holidays with friends, cousins, and family. That place has since become known to some of us as the center of the universe, and it will be in our blood forever. Dad had a wonderful sense of humor, enjoyment of comedy, and a sense of the ridiculous. Sunday night goon show, you might recall on the radio, and the endless videos of Mr. Bean would literally bring him to tears. Characters aplenty, such as those, were also to be found in Grahamstown, and how Dad loved a dinner party back in the day. They were smart and regular occasions where children were seen and not heard. Sally remembers her role of beautifying and hosting these occasions. Out came the silver service, and much banter and fare ensued with family friends, including the Branfords, Extians, Seagulls, Whites, Barkers, Davenports, and many more. He loved entertaining folk, and this continued in Knysna, where garden party or summer tea graced the immaculate lawns at 16 Steenbond Crescent on Leisure Isle, just for fun or on the occasion of Mom and Dad hosting a New Year party, which was coincidentally also his birthday. Grandchildren were warned not to scuff the lawn while playing cricket or other games, as Dad had a quiet and silent competition with his friend Derek Ferrandis on whom had the best lawn on the island and could earn the Green Fingers Award for their particular garden. As his daughter recalls, Dad loved the beautiful things, and more than that, flowers in his garden. Picking flowers from the garden for the house as a gift gave him great pleasure. Until he moved from Knysna, obviously to Cape Town, he would always pick flowers, wrap them in their stems in wet paper and in tinfoil, and hand them to Tanya, my wife, to take back to Port Elizabeth for my mother-in-law, Marlene, who we always asked after. A random act of kindness that meant so much. Just a small little, there was only a little bit of flowers, but the gesture of picking his own flowers was incredible. He also believed in a formalized, kind and gratuitous act, and was a strong serving member of Rotary both in Grahamstown and Knysna. Can I just have a little sip here, please? I'm nearly done. Dad's kindness and humility are traits that are featured prominently in the messages and tribute that the family has received. It struck me reading the comments about his humility. For the first time, that I realized that I don't think I'd ever heard Dad boasting about what he had achieved in life, which is considerable. He always dealt with people in a polite but firm manner, and so enjoyed assisting people in their careers, as his testimony to the many graduate and PhD students, the last when he was 90. In looking through the messages, the words such as amazing man, inspirational, wonderful man, kind in every way, legend of Knysna, true gentleman, distinguished man, impossible to forget, I could not have asked for a greater teacher nor kinder friend, are some of the terms and phrases quoted. And Dr. Lowe Claessens, who Dad introduced to and then took over the Knysna Basin project, recalled her best advice received from Dad was, go sit quietly and think. Right. Others recall him as a great teacher who insisted on her removing my mascara before using the microscope. That shock of white hair, larger than life, with his voice to go to it. The great white shark, a great mentor, an influence of many and of our generation, an inspired lecturer and brilliant teacher, a man of integrity in his approach to tertiary education. And then, I love this one, terrifying and wonderful with a wicked sense of humor. He left his mark upon this earth and on so many people over his glorious 94 years. How proud are we of him? Dad was a great man in so many ways. And then one that we can all strive to just take a few lessons from to make us better persons. That's all that he would have wanted. The tapestry of Dad's life is bold, inspirational, and strong. So shall he be remembered. Bold, inspirational, and strong. Be strong and of good courage, Dad.
Good morning. So I'm here today to represent Brian's sister Audrey and other members of the Carter family in the UK and USA. Uncle Brian, to my brothers and me, was always in our lives. From the days we lived in South Africa to the past 40 years we have lived in the UK. Despite the distance, he was forever interested in our careers, our families, and embraced us fully on occasional visits to South Africa, most recently the 4 visits my brothers and I have made with our wives to South Africa over the past 5 years. We have many wonderful memories of time spent with our cousins in Grahamstown, time on the farm, and holiday time in Knysna while our families were growing up. My own personal memory was starting and never finishing a chemistry degree at Rhodes University, where Brian helpfully encouraged me to believe that the scientific world was perhaps not one for me. How right he was, and how thankful I am I heeded his advice and changed career. My brother Anthony, however, was cut out for a scientific career, and he gratefully recalls the interest his Uncle Brian showed in him and the encouragement he gave from an early age. One of his abiding memories were many hours spent wandering together around the sand flats of the Crom River, sharing his knowledge and passion as they studied the fascinating ecosystems of the estuary. Brian was an inspiration to him, and this led him to follow a career in science and a lifelong fascination and interest in nature, where today, in his retirement, he is the proud owner of an ancient English woodland, which he is nurturing for subsequent generations. My brother Martin, on the other hand, recalls flying with Brian in his plane in South Africa and driving with him through the narrow lanes of Cornwall in the UK, both illuminating events in their own way. Above all, he remembers him as a wonderful, loving, and fascinating uncle, for which he will be forever thankful. Finally, and most importantly, a few personal memories and words from your sister, Audrey. The Allanson family arrived in South Africa from England in 1939. Father, mother, twins, Brian and Brenda, aged 11 years, and Audrey, aged 7. In no time, Brian had discovered snakes in the nearby veld and was sending back snake skins to his surprised grandparents in Liverpool. When he was about 14, he was given an elaborate chemistry set which he would occasionally blow himself up with. And when 16, he was into dissecting guinea pigs, which he got from the local medical research establishment, preserving the results in formaldehyde. So when life got boring for my mother and her friends, she was sure to find something new and exciting in Brian's bedroom cum laboratory. Brian was always my big brother and has been so encouraging and supportive of my 3 sons. But as they say, behind every great man there is a great woman. And my sister-in-law Sue, in bringing up 5 children and giving Brian unending support, was surely that. So Brian, you'll always be remembered as my big brother. I miss you so much. May your soul now be at rest with Brenda and rise in glory. Love, Audrey.
Good morning. It's an honor for me to pay tribute to and celebrate the life of Professor Emeritus Brian Allanson on behalf of the scientific community. My first brush with the formidable professor was during a Zoology 1 prac, when I arrived at the prac in a Rolling Stones t-shirt and haircut. Without uttering a word, he demonstrably pointed to the door, making it quite clear that I should go back to my room and change into something suitable. That was in the days when Rhodes University lecturers wore jackets and tie when they delivered their lectures. My first face-to-face encounter with him was at the beginning of my second year, when he asked me a single blunt question: "Did you pass Chemistry 1?" I replied in the affirmative, and from that day onwards we built up a friendship from teacher, mentor, employer to colleague that lasted for 57 years, although I must admit it was some 30 years before I finally plucked up the courage to call him Brian. He addressed me as "my dear fellow." We went on expeditions to remote parts of southern Africa together, scuba dived in the crocodile-infested waters of Lake Sibaya, flew from Grahamstown to the Orange River in his Piper Cherokee, and enjoyed many a fireside chat. Brian was not a natural scuba diver. I remember he once tossed an article entitled "Man is not a Seagoing Animal" onto the library table in the old zoology department during tea time and instructed us to read it. But he also appreciated the value of looking a fish in the eye in its natural habitat when you are trying to understand its natural history. One of my favorite photographs of Brian, taken by my wife Carolyn, shows him in his bright red shorts with a shock of white hair collecting plankton with a hand net. We called the photo "The Great White Shark Filter Feeding." Towards the end of his life, when Carolyn and I visited Brian and Sue in the retirement home, we communicated by writing notes to one another, but he retained a keen sense of interest in everything that we did. Brian Allanson was schooled at Grey High School in Port Elizabeth and studied zoology and chemistry at the University of Natal in Pietermaritzburg, graduating in 1948. After teaching science at Hilton College for 3 years, he earned his master's degree in marine biology at UCT and taught there as a junior lecturer in zoology for a while commencing his studies for a PhD. After receiving a research fellowship from the CSIR, he and Sue moved to Pretoria, where he completed his PhD and was appointed head of the Division of Hydrobiology at the CSIR's National Institute for Water Research. At the age of only 35 years, Brian Allanson was appointed Professor of Zoology and Entomology at Rhodes University, a position he held with distinction for 25 years. He was also the university's first Dean of Research and became one of the scholarly giants on the campus. It's no accident that the Department of Zoo and Ento remains one of the top performing research departments on the Rhodes campus. In 1965, Professor Allanson established the Institute for Freshwater Studies and became its first director. This institute later emerged with the Hydrological Research Unit to form the Institute for Water Research at Rhodes University. In 1968, he established a research station on the shores of Lake Sibaya, which became an extremely active hub for research in this poorly studied part of South Africa. He later also established research stations on the Wilderness Lakes and the Orange River. Under his leadership, the Institute played a pivotal role in harnessing the contributions of many universities and research institutions to produce knowledge and understanding on the physiology, chemistry, and biology of coastal lakes and estuaries throughout Southern Africa. In 1983, Professor Allanson established the Southern Ocean Research Group, with research sites on Marion Island and in Antarctica. He developed a multidisciplinary approach to the study of complex ecosystems, and his program was one of the first to advance our understanding of global climate change. Among the research highlights at this time, he served as chief scientist on several voyages of the South African Antarctic research vessel S.A. Gullis to the Antarctic. Professor Allanson was South Africa's leading limnologist for many years and also made many seminal contributions, a favorite phrase of his, to oceanography, polar science, zoology, and other fields. Most significantly, he opened up opportunities for generations of students and young researchers that set them on their life course. That is the most important contribution that a research leader can make. His ex-students now populate freshwater, marine, and biological science programs throughout the world. After his formal retirement in 1988, Professor Allanson continued to serve Rhodes University as a researcher and mentor of distinction. He and Sue, who had faithfully supported him throughout his long scientific career, moved to Knysna, where he set up a research program on the estuary. This program, now known as the Knysna Basin Project, continues to serve the local and international community to this day, safeguarding the health of one of our most important estuarine systems. And as Peter mentioned, at the age of 90, he graduated a PhD student and published a journal article, an extraordinary example of inspired and determined scholarship. Professor Allanson received many honours and awards, including the Fellowship of the Royal Society of South Africa, Gold Medal of the Zoological Society of Southern Africa, South Africa's Order for Meritorious Service Silver, which is awarded by the State President, Doctor of Science honoris causa and Distinguished Research Fellow from the Rhodes University, and the Naumann Tinneman Medal, the highest honour bestowed internationally for scientific contributions to limnology. Brian Allanson was the professor's professor, almost a character out of Gilbert and Sullivan. But behind the haughty exterior lay a great intellect, a gifted researcher and administrator, and a very personable human being. He was a towering intellect who lived a story worth telling, and his legacy will live on for generations. In my opinion, we shall never see the like of him again.
I think this may be an appropriate moment to sit and reflect, and Jeremy will play something for us, and then we'll continue.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was beautiful. I have a poem for Daddy. I have a poem for Daddy by an unknown. The family tree. A limb has fallen from the family tree. keep hearing a voice that says, "Grieve not for me." Remember the best times, the laughter, the song, the good life I lived while I was strong. Continue my heritage. I'm counting on you. Keep smiling, and surely the sun will shine through. My mind is at ease, my soul is at rest, remembering all how I was truly blessed. Continue traditions, no matter how small. Go on with your life, don't worry about falls. I miss you all dearly, so keep up your chin until the day comes we're together again. Remember this. Each of us here are representing each one of the Granny and Grandpa's children, children's children, the grandchildren. Dearest Grandpa, so strong in my memory is visiting your lab in Neisner, where I met moments of you within the special creatures you were studying. A giant crab, so large, so bold, intentional, unforgettable. A family of seahorses, so graceful, honest. I learned too that day of the soft grass that grew around the edges of the estuary that carried nourishment for so many. A source of knowledge and nourishment you were and will no doubt continue to be. You in your white coat, I felt so special and so proud to be your granddaughter that day. I came to you with questions of the world around me. You always had something to share of a place I had visited that you had too, or something of its vegetation or landscape. Your equaled love for science and the arts was such a gift to us all, inspiring brilliance in all fields, no matter the paths we chose. Be strong and of good courage, you would say, something etched in my heart forevermore, along with the joys of your frequent and gentle smiles and handholds in your later years. I have something from my brother Franco. Whilst I could only dream of reaching your achievements, you pointed me in the right direction when I needed it. Your strategy of sitting me down in the study and having the chat. Your grandfather, you were someone I could look to for words of wisdom and achieve. Life skills come together on the lagoon, also over a cornflakes with raisins. Today I toast to you in your crystal glass and thank you for being my grandpa. I will miss you. Love, Franco. And from my oldest brother Renzo. Grandpa, where do I start? I found it hard to put into words the memories and impact you have had on my life. All the memories with you and Granny spending our school holidays in Leisure Isle will forever remain in my heart and mind. The incredible opportunities you give.
So nothing is
Good one.